Desde 2019, a Toyota vem acelerando o futuro, produzindo no Brasil o primeiro híbrido flex do mundo. De lá pra cá, as coisas mudaram. Muitos entraram na tendência que a gente criou. Mas sabe o que não mudou? A confiança do brasileiro na Toyota, que não veio da noite pro dia. Toyota, no futuro há muito tempo. Paz no trânsito começa por você.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Music, the show that looks at the money behind the music industry with me, Steve Lamack, and Music Ally's Head of Insight, Stuart Dredge. A couple of things I think we have to start with that actually happened just after we recorded the last episode. So a couple of things from the end of last week, including, we should mention, there's more on those Oasis gigs. I can hear some people sighing already, but also there's an update of about how the competition watchdog is now getting involved, looking at how tickets were sold. So we'll come to that in a minute. But also it's the Mercury Music Prize last Thursday, won by the Leeds band English Teacher with their debut album. I don't think, Stuart, I've ever seen a band so unprepared for winning something. Did you watch it? Have you seen it?
I did, and because I've seen a lot of fake "oh, I'm so surprised" in my time, and they were genuinely flabbergasted, weren't they?
They really were very underprepared for that speech. But well done, English Teacher. I don't know, what did you make though of the new streamlined Mercury Prize, which was, I guess, obviously brought to us on a much lower budget than previous years?
Yeah, there wasn't a sponsor, was there? Was that the reason for it, or there was some? It was obviously.
You would think so. Yeah.
The thing that I thought didn't work was essentially they all sat in a room together watching themselves play live. Like they're watching video from BBC performances, weren't they? Mm-hmm. And then it would always cut back to the artist afterwards and they'd be sitting there with a grimace on, which is the grimace of, I don't really like watching myself perform. So that was the bit I wasn't sure that worked. Like they looked a bit awkward having to watch their own performances.
I wonder, do you think there were just no takers for the sponsorship this year? And if so, what does that say about where the award, or even pop music in general, is at the moment?
Yeah, it's frustrating because I think, we talked about whether we think it's a good thing and how it's proven, but I think it's been a good thing broadly. Like the spotlight, it shines on these artists and albums. And so I would have hoped someone would jump it. And I would have especially hoped, I think, that some of these streaming services, with Spotify, Apple, whoever, they're often accused of not really undermining albums, aren't they? They're accused of you're all about tracks and playlists. And this would be a great opportunity to say, no, we like albums too. We're going to put some money behind this. But maybe next year.
Yeah, I wonder as well, did that lead to, I don't know what the impact, because usually there is a knock-on effect, isn't there? If you win the Mercury Prize or you're nominated for the Mercury Prize, if you're one of the records that people are talking about, usually that has an impact on sales or streams. Has that been the case this year? Do we know?
Well, normally I get press releases saying streams up by X. Didn't really get any of that. There's no news stories about the sales boost. English Teacher have got 346,000 monthly listens on Spotify, which is, is decent for a band of their at their level. But I don't think there have been any massive. I suppose the massive spikes are coming for Oasis, aren't they? Because of the reunion announcement. So maybe that's taking some of the energy out of a Mercury spike. But yeah, no, it's been the after has been very quiet. People seem quite pleased with the winner, don't they? It's a good winner. But I don't think there's been a massive spike. It's
a great winner, for nothing else, for that stat that it's the first time in the past 10 years, the first time for 10 years, that a band outside of London, who come from outside of London, have won the award. So that's good. It'll be interesting, I think, though, to see what happens next with the Mercuries. Although, without sounding like a PR man for the company that I obviously work for. Well done to the BBC, though, for keeping the prize alive while everyone works out its future. We'll see what happens next year. The other thing, having just mentioned them, Stuart, which we have to return to, is, it was about 2 hours after we finished recording the last episode that Oasis announced 2 new Wembley shows, but also put out a press release, and I think it's worth sharing some of this just in case you're interested and haven't seen it, because it responds to the furore around the initial gig ticket sales and to people's unhappiness with the prices of the tickets. So Ticketmaster and Oasis. I guess it was an Oasis press release, but talked about the tickets, and it says the Oasis Live 25 tour was the biggest concert launch ever seen in the UK and Ireland, with over 10 million fans from 158 countries queuing to buy tickets. However, such intense demand saw all ticket platforms struggling to cope, resulting in immense frustration and disappointment for fans who missed out after queuing for many hours. As for the well-reported complaints that many buyers had over the operation of Ticketmaster's dynamic ticketing, it needs to be made clear that Oasis leave these decisions on ticketing and pricing entirely to their promoters and management, and at no time had any awareness that dynamic pricing was going to be used. While prior meetings between promoters, Ticketmaster and the band's management resulted in a positive ticket sales strategy, which would be a fair experience for fans, including dynamic ticketing to help keep general ticket prices down, as well as reduce touting, the execution of the plan failed to meet expectations. All parties involved did their utmost to deliver the best possible fan experience, but due to the unprecedented demand, this became impossible to achieve. I think all this sort of backs up my suspicion that I don't think even the Oasis camp were banking on just that many people applying for tickets. That's what it feels like.
Yeah, but also, I mean, my first reaction to that was like, I'm not sure the queuing was the biggest complaint, was it? I mean, people expected there'd be a long queue, and there was, and that we're used to it now. The complaint was that the tickets went up double in price when you got to the end of that queue. So, in a way, focusing on the number of people is almost, it feels a bit like throwing the scent away from what the real problem is. Although they do get onto that, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it's dynamic ticket pricing. This is the thing in the customer experience. I mean, this is the thing which has ruffled the authorities, hasn't it? I mean, and you mentioned this because this was something else which was breaking last week while we were recording. But the competition watchdog has now launched an investigation into the way tickets were sold for these Oasis reunion gigs. What's the latest on that?
Yeah, so they're investigating whether that on sale broke consumer protection laws, which kind of boils down to a couple of things. One is that did they explain to fans that dynamic pricing would be used beforehand, clearly enough? And the second is, were people put under pressure to buy tickets at a higher price than expected? And that was that moment when you got to the checkout and it was like 300 and something quid instead of 100 and something quid. And were people put under unfair pressure then to go, well, if I don't buy these now, I won't get tickets. So that's something that the CMA is looking at. So yeah, they're asking Ticketmaster and the band's management and the promoters for their feedback, but fans can submit their evidence too. You can go to the CMA's website and you can submit your thoughts and your kind of evidence of what happened. So they're really looking for views from everyone. And yeah, and it's, I mean, not to go back to that statement though, the one thing I'm not so sure about is this idea of Oasis leave the decisions entirely to their promoters and management and didn't know about it. And then in the next breath say, but our promoters and management planned this with Ticketmaster. I'm not sure fans will see that differentiation clearly. I'm not sure they'll say, oh, well, Noel and Liam didn't personally know, so I'm not cross anymore. The band didn't know what was happening. Like, I feel like now there have been a few controversies. Like there was Taylor Swift and Bruce Springsteen controversies in the US around this, Oasis now. I feel as an artist at that level, you probably do need to have that conversation. How are we selling tickets? How's it working? Like, even if you're not the person deciding it, I feel like, I mean, Robert Smith was tweeting, we talked about him, wasn't he? He was saying he got someone to explain it to him. And then he went, no, I'm not using it. It sounds like, I don't know. I'm not sure it gets them off the hook to say we personally didn't decide to use this.
Are you trying to compare Robert Smith and Liam Gallagher at this point? Because I suspect Liam Gallagher is not really that interested, particularly in the mechanics of the music industry. I don't think.
Maybe not. I mean, it was weird because he was like on Twitter. Like, I really like Liam Gallagher on Twitter because he basically he insults people in a very funny, surreal fashion, and like people tweet him because they want him to insult them back in a funny way. Like that's his persona on Twitter, and it works, and it's good, I think. But then last week, someone was saying you ripped us off, and he went "shut up" in all caps, which I looked at that and said that's just how he is on Twitter. But I'm not sure competition regulators will quite have as much sense of a humour about it. They might look at that and go, "That's not good." So I don't know. It's a bit.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
just.
I see where you're coming from, but at the same time, I would imagine Liam, and maybe to a certain extent Noel, and of course we'll never know probably for sure unless they come out and address this issue personally. But I imagine somebody like Liam, the figure they want is the guarantee. They will be having negotiations about doing the gigs, and somebody will say, how much are we going to get? And the management will say, well, the guarantee which is being offered by the promoters is this figure. And I think that's where Liam's interest in the money ends. It doesn't. He doesn't want. He's not maybe going to drill down like Robert Smith is into how that money is generated. You see what I mean?
Maybe not, but I do sort of think now maybe this will be a learning experience then for other artists and artists at that level. Like if you're playing lots of stadium gigs, for their management to say, let's have this conversation. We'll explain dynamic. We'll get Ticketmaster in to explain dynamic pricing, because I think now Oasis are getting this massive backlash, and like they say, they didn't know. But I feel like as a fan, if the band's team have taken a decision that you feel is really unfair, I'm not sure you're going to feel any less angry if the band themselves did or didn't know about it. Like it's all the people. So I don't know. I look at that. I was like, oh, don't just kind of maybe embrace the maybe a bit more humble about it and say, yeah, this was a mistake, which they did in the end. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, a competition inquiry. It's a serious business. This is not just people doing petitions that no one's going to read online. This is going to be an investigation, and it's going to look into it. I mean, it's crazy though. Like some of the takes, like yesterday, there was a polling company was put out a survey, and they were asking people, should the government nationalize Ticketmaster to stop this sort of thing happening? Like honestly, and 58%, I think, of the population said yes, they should nationalize. And I'm like, I don't think anyone thinks that the solution to this is for the government to own Ticketmaster. But that's the level of kind of take we're at the moment in this debate. It's really, but yeah, so this CMA investigation will take its time, but it's good that it's getting the thoughts of the band and the promoters and Ticketmaster, and it's good that fans get to have their say. So I think anyone who's listening, who's feeling cross or has thoughts to share, they should go there. And
I noticed this morning that Which, the consumer magazine, they've now pitched in as well, running a piece saying that Ticketmaster's in-demand pricing for Oasis tickets potentially breach consumer law. Which warned today, and they've been collecting together evidence from fans who applied for tickets. And the story goes on, Which adds in this piece, we believe Ticketmaster's lack of transparency could have breached consumer law, and Which is calling on Oasis and Ticketmaster to refund the difference to fans who paid inflated prices for their tickets. I mean, who would have guessed that Which magazine would end up entwined in a story about Oasis? I mean, who's next? Radio Times? The Beano? Dennis the Menace says Oasis ticket prices are a disgrace. How am I meant to buy Oasis tickets with my pocket money? Said an angry Mr. Menace. Where does it stop? But Ticketmaster, though, I mean, Ticketmaster are taking it from all angles, aren't they? Because has there been any move? We've covered this story before on the pods. This is happening in the States at the moment, isn't it? That's Live Nation, obviously. Ticketmaster is part of Live Nation, and there is a body of opinion in America that suggests that, well, this means that Live Nation have too much power. So authorities are suggesting that maybe Live Nation and Ticketmaster should be split apart. That's rumbling on, isn't it, in the States?
It is. So what they really didn't need was a huge hoo-ha in the UK with the competition regulators getting involved. But it's separate issues. In the States, about is their monopoly too big? Are they too powerful? The venues. So there's a lot of policy stuff going on. And when you're that larger company, that you have a big team of policy people whose job it is to deal with that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if sympathy is the right word. I don't like dynamic pricing as an idea. I feel there's better ways to tackle touting, but I'm not a deep expert on ticketing industry. I'll defer to experts who can debate the ins and outs. But it's just an option. Like they developed this idea, this might stop touts getting tickets. This might be the way we do it. And as a band, a promoter, you can use it if you want to and not use it if you don't want to. So they're not forcing bands to use it. So I think that's something that shouldn't be forgotten, that it's just an option. And I suspect that I expect a bunch of artists, or at least their promoters, whoever takes decisions, may be kind of scared off it after this point. So in a way, before any regulators get involved or governments, I wonder if the sheer backlash this time round may lead to less people using it in the UK for a while, and in that sense, the problem will maybe ebb down a bit. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see what trading standards make of the Oasis situation. We'll keep an ear on that story. In other news, now this story is the sort of thing that people make documentary podcasts about. This I mean, it's a real twist in the real crime series. This one, this is the new. I don't know if anyone's seen this. And an American-based producer has been arrested and charged with multiple felonies over uploading AI-generated music to streaming services, but then using bot accounts to inflate the number of streams that they've received. Talk us through this. We'll have to take it step by step because, I mean, this guy has been naughty on several levels, hasn't he? But he's only been charged for the actual for the bots, for the fraud around using bots to inflate the streaming figures. But tell us about this guy.
Yeah, so this is a man called Michael Smith who was arrested and charged. He's been charged with wire fraud conspiracy, wire fraud, and money laundering conspiracy. So this is not just someone who's been kind of criticizing the press for doing something. This is a proper big lawsuit from the United States government, and each of those charges has a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. So this is like a serious criminal indictment. So yeah, what he's accused of doing is essentially creating hundreds of thousands of songs, uploading them to streaming services, and then using bots, like you say, to artificially inflate their streams and get their royalties. I think the indictment alleges he was doing more than 660,000 streams a day at one point of his music. And I think the number on it is like maybe $10 million of royalties, and I believe there's a bit in it where there's an email boasting of maybe $12 million. But yeah, it's significant sums.
Yeah.
And this is the key point. So yeah, the criminality here is inflating your streams using bots and getting fraudulent royalties that you shouldn't have got. The AI element isn't the crime.
Right. But, I mean, some of that music that he's posted might be, but
it's as bad as mine.
But posting AI tracks, that's not illegal. But yes, it's the fraud comes with. Well, he's frauding the streaming services. That's what
he's allegedly frauding. Yeah. So the thing is, yeah, the big concern, I think, one of the concerns around AI music is. So if you were trying to do streaming fraud, if you were trying to do this kind of an operation, you can't just like release one track and use bots to get 1 billion streams on it, because you'll be caught straight away. Like it's like walking into a bank saying I am a bank robber. So what streaming fraud works on is having lots and lots of tracks that each get a few plays, which in theory is hard to detect. But it's hard. I mean, even if you're it's hard to kind of produce that much music yourself through traditional means. I think the indictment runs through some of the early attempts he had to make enough music to make this work, and he couldn't. And that's where AI comes in, because with AI, it's very easy to create this level of music, this scale that you need. So it's not that the AI is the crime, but the AI is a tool that scammers could use. And that's what's been one of the worries. And this is one of the first criminal prosecutions, involving it. But the other thing that happened, this is why I'll be super careful and read out statements, because in the indictment, it mentions some other people who were associated with this chap Smith. And one was an unnamed boss of an AI music startup, which is the company that helped him create that music. And they signed an agreement to get a monthly retainer or percentage of his royalties. So they were the tool he used to create all this music. And they weren't named. But then a journalist at Billboard the next day was like, hang on a minute. They've mentioned some of the songs in this indictment and the artist names. And you can go to, in the US collecting sites, ASCAP and BMI, you can go to their databases and look up songs and see who wrote them. So they did that. And it turned out that the co-writer on quite a lot of those songs was a chap called Alex Mitchell, who's CEO of Boomy, which is one of the AI music companies that's around. So it was kind of like a big flashing neon sign pointing to the idea. And just to declare this very carefully, like Music High, who I write for, I think we might have been the first site to write about Boomy, because I spotted them on this email I got from this startups database saying there's a new AI music Boomy. And we wrote about them, and I've interviewed him a few times. He's a nice man. He's very thoughtful about AI music and what it can do. He's not accused of a crime in this case. He's not being charged, because the crime is the fraudulent bots, not the AI music. And he put a statement out saying we were shocked by the details in the recently filed indictment of Michael Smith, which we were reviewing. Michael Smith consistently represented himself as legitimate. So the argument from Boomy is, actually, this guy was doing this crime, but he was saying to us he was being legit. And that's something that will be tested in the case.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, like, not going to prejudge this case. Like, the indictment sets out the charges, and now Michael Smith will get to defend them.
Yeah.
But it is bringing together these worries about, one of the worries the industry has about AI is it could be used to do streaming fraud. And I think this case is going to sharpen those fears. And I think it's going to create pressure on AI music firms and distributors, who are the ones you have to upload the music to streaming services through, and the streaming service. I think people were saying, right, okay, in this case, how did their processes work for spotting this sort of thing happening? Because one thing is here, it was spotted. Like the MLC in the States, which collects mechanical royalties for streaming, they blew the whistle and said, we think this is bogus. A streaming service that wasn't named also raised concerns. So this was spotted and he's been charged. And so there are some processes that are working to try and stop this happening. But I think what you're going to see from this case is you're going to see the big record labels and the big music industry bodies saying to all the companies who could be used as unwitting tools in this sort of scheme, what are you going to do to make sure this can't happen again? What are you doing already? Mm-hmm. So it's going to kind of enhance discussion around that, regardless of what happens in the case, I think. That was going
to be one of my questions. Actually, was how was it spotted, and and who by? Thank you for answering that one.
So the MLC. I mean, the interesting thing. So the other context to this is about a month after the MLC, which collects the royalties, blew the whistle on him. Spotify removed a bunch of music that had been uploaded using Boomy, the music service. And that was all in the news at the time about how Spotify's removed some of Boomy's music. And there was a whole follow-on story about how Boomy got it back on. And that was happening around the same time. And it's not been made clear whether that was related to this case. Mm-hmm. But yeah, streaming services are on the lookout for fraud in a big way. And they're developing building systems to spot when stuff is being streamed with no apparent reason for artists that no one's heard of in artificial patterns. So that is going to be quite an important science of streaming going forward, is how do you spot fraud, especially if, like I said, it's hundreds of thousands of tracks getting a few plays each rather than, one rubbish track that suddenly has 2 billion plays and no one knows how. Like, that's not how it's done.
My other question is anyone else culpable? Does anyone else get charged for this? Because I imagine he must probably use the distributor. Is anyone else involved in getting that music onto the platform? Are they seen as also being guilty of something?
Well, they're not charged. They mentioned in the case he used 2 distributors, I believe, or maybe even 3, and they are mentioned in the indictment. But again, one of them raised concerns, says we don't think this is right. So no, they're not charged. They will have policies saying you can't use us to do this kind of thing. So they're more the unwitting pipeline. But I do think so. They won't be charged, but I do think they will be pressured by the music industry to say, right, how are you going to stop saying? The other thing as well is obviously you have to be unwitting. So if you knew what was happening, if you knew what the plan was, if you knew bots were involved. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that would be the case for a distributor in this case. They would just know. But I suppose bringing it back to basic level, you could argue that if someone is uploading hundreds of thousands of tracks through you as distributor, and then they're getting loads of streams, and he's doing 660,000, you would think that's a red flag.
Yeah.
And I believe in this case, some of them did raise red flag, and they were involved in the process of kind of, getting to this point.
Staying in the world of streaming, Spotify has won a long-running court case in which it was accused of streaming Eminem's music without his permission.
Yeah, this is the episode where I try not to get us sued, isn't it? It's all the legal stories that
it really is. Do your best.
Yeah, okay. So this is a case that was launched in 2019 by 8 Mile Style. So they were the publisher of Eminem's music. And they sued Spotify for, I think it was for 30 million quid, saying it hadn't been paying them full royalties and it hadn't licensed Eminem's music properly in terms of the publishing rights. And this is tracks like Lose Yourself and Without Me, so they're big tracks. And what's happened is this has been running for a long time, for 5-6 years. And the judges kind of found that it's true, Spotify didn't have a license to stream those works, but it wasn't its fault. It thought another company had the rights when they didn't.
Right.
So there's a company called Cobalt which collected royalties for Eminem's music, but it didn't have the rights to actually license the songs. So Spotify should have been licensing those from an offshoot of 8 Mile Style. Then Cobalt would have collected the royalties on them for it. That was the kind of relationship. And the judge was actually quite stern about 8 Mile Style, and essentially said, if they had said very clearly, we own the rights to these songs, you need to license them from us, Spotify could have licensed them and this wouldn't have happened. And there's even a quote saying, they had every opportunity to set things right and simply chose not to do so for no apparent reason other than being the victim of infringement pays better than being an ordinary licensor. So the judge's conclusion was they could have told Spotify, we own these rights, you need to license them, but suing seemed like a... And there's the backdrop to this is 8 Mile Style previously had a legal battle with Apple back in 2009 about a similar issue about downloads of Eminem's music and whether Apple had the rights. And they ended up settling in that case. So it has got a history of like these legal tangles with digital music services. But in this case, Spotify has prevailed. And it's not that it didn't have the licenses. That was correct. But the judge's view is it wasn't its fault. But if anyone's worried about Eminem, he's got more than 75 million monthly listeners on Spotify at the moment. So he's doing all right. He's not, scratching around to pay his bills. He's doing all right from streaming now. And
he's doing better than Method Man, as covered last week.
Yeah.
Heaven 17's Martin Ware is not happy with the makers of Grand Theft Auto. Really not happy.
He's not happy at all, is he? No. So Grand Theft Auto. Have you ever played Grand Theft Auto at all?
Back in the day, day. I think, when right up to the edition where I think they first used different radio stations and you could pick different music to listen to when you were in one of the cars. I think up to around that point, yeah.
Yeah, and that's become a really big part of it. They license, I think, the last game, Grand Theft Auto 5, it sold more than 200 million copies. And while you're driving around doing what Grand Theft Auto characters do, much of which is quite violent, you can play radio stations. And there's a lot of music. They licensed like 440 tracks, I think, for the last game. So there was a lot of music licensing for it.
Right.
Anyway, Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out next year. And they wanted to license Temptation by Heaven 17, which is obviously a big 80s hit. And so Martin Ware tweeted and said, I got this offer, and I scrolled down to the bottom to see how rich I'd be. And the offer was $7,500 for a buyout. So that means flat fee, doesn't get any more royalties, doesn't get any more money based on how much it's played or how many games. $7,500, you'll be in Grand Theft Auto next game. And his reaction was, go fuck yourself. That's how he tweeted. He pointed out the last game grossed $8.6 billion. It's 8 or 6. It grossed a lot of money, billions of dollars. And so he was like, this is ridiculous. And what was interesting was he tweeted this, and then there was this whole discussion on Twitter, Twitter X, formerly Twitter, so I should say. Some people said, good on you. Those are corporate behemoths making loads of money. Others said you could have negotiated. You should have negotiated and got a higher price, which what I want to think of is him ringing him up and going, yeah, that offer, I want it to go higher and higher. That's what I would have done. And they would have laughed so much. But other people said they're licensing hundreds of tracks. Get over yourself. Who is Heaven 17 anyway? There were a lot of people on Twitter or X who are very cross and love wading into arguments. So a lot of people are saying, who are Heaven 17? Who the hell are you? Get over yourself. And by the way, this is great promotion. And that is one of the points I wanted to talk about. This idea of Grand Theft Auto as brilliant promotion for your music. Because, and this is what I wouldn't have predicted, Simon Raymond entered the debate. So, Cocteau Twins, Bella Union, not a man who is a kind of corporate shill for big mega companies. Mm-hmm. He chimed in really politely, asking if it was too late to change Martin's mind, and said, look, 200 million people bought the last game. That's a huge audience. He said Shazams would be massive. People would use Shazam to kind of figure out what that song is. And he reckoned that it could push the song's streams to like 10 or 20 times what they are now.
Right. So that's where the money is. He's saying that's the knock-on. It's the knock-on effect, and new audiences discovering your music. That's why you take a smaller fee.
That was it. And he was right. And Simon was writing with sympathy, saying, "I've got sympathy for this, and we're in a band from a similar era. I understand how this can seem really low." But so he reckoned that a GTA sync could push Temptation to like 300 million streams, and it's kind of fuzzy maths, but that could be like $1.5 million in royalties, roughly. So it's kind of, I mean, there's this thing. I mean, you've probably seen this in music. This idea of promotion over, oh, it's promotional. This is really good for you. It's promotional. It gives you exposure. And like often people are saying that when they're trying to rip you off, like that is a thing. There's that whole this whole Twitter account. It's like for exposure, that's showing these terrible offers, saying, "Well, you'll get good exposure from this."
Yeah,
and that is like, I think for musicians, it's a running saw. Oh, do this, no money, but you'll get promotion. But there is also this argument for some people that actually, in the case of this kind of game, that promotion does work. But when it comes down to it, Martin Ware from Heaven 17 he's at liberty to say no. He's at liberty to go back and renegotiate. Yeah. So it's. But I'd love. I mean, there were a few people who are sync people in this thread as well, saying actually it's not that uncommon a price. People get 10 grand for being in a huge game. It does seem that those prices aren't low, especially when there's so much music in it. But I don't know. I mean, it was a very angry. It was a very angry initial tweet, and some angry people in the replies, but actually quite a lot of insight. I learned more about sync, I think, from reading that thread than I thought I would. I thought it'd be everyone just having a go at each other, but it was some people chiming in saying, "Well, here's the numbers, and I'll run these numbers, and it seems fair or not fair." And so but then maybe they'll get the Cocteau Twins instead now. That would be quite good. I think the Cocteau Twins could work. So maybe Simon Raymond, through having come in quite reasonable, maybe they'll ring him up now and say, "Well, actually, now you're here."
Talking of exposure, not all exposure is good exposure. Certainly, if your music is being used at a Donald Trump rally, according to a couple of artists who have demanded that the former president stop using their music. The White Stripes and I guess it's the estate of the late Isaac Hayes have both turned on Trump after Trump employed the use of some of their music at one of his live appearances. In fact, I think the White Stripes, they're actually threatening to take Trump to court to make him get offering a cease and desist. Please do not use our music again.
That's it, yeah. So Jack White posted on Instagram, which is still a sentence I find myself saying and thinking, I don't want him to post on Instagram. He should be sending a Valve pigeon message. But he did an Instagram post saying, "This machine sues fascists." And he posted the first page of the lawsuit, which is from him and Meg. So it is the White Stripes suing Donald Trump for playing Seven Nation Army. He's done this before in 2016. They complained then, and now they're suing him. And maybe they'll be encouraged by the fact that last week a judge ordered Trump to stop playing. It's Hold On, I'm Coming, which Isaac Hayes co-wrote. So it's the publishing side. What's happened is a lawsuit from his family. He hasn't lost the lawsuit, I believe. It's more that it's ordering him not to play it until the case is settled.
Right.
So he's been kind of told to stop I think they're seeking $3 million in licensing fees because he's played it 134 times after they asked him to stop. Which is
really. Crikey. I mean,
to
be fair, Isaac Hayes had 11 children. I found that out while I was researching this story on Wikipedia, if Wikipedia is to be believed. So, I mean, it's a large sum, but I imagine it'll have to be shared out to several people.
True. Well, talking of several people, Trump is using YMCA again now instead. He's stopped playing Hold On, I'm Coming, and he's using YMCA, which is something he's done before. Have you ever seen that clip of him dancing to YMCA? And it's like, this is like the worst family wedding you can imagine. It's YMCA, but Donald Trump is on. But I want to do some digging because I was quite curious about what are the rights and wrongs of this. Like, what can you play? And it turns out ASCAP, the US collector side, has got a fact just about political music licensing for campaigns. And what I found out was, if you're a political campaign, you need to get licensing deals for music. You can't just rely on we're doing a rally at a venue that has a license, because those licenses often don't cover political rallies.
Right.
And ASCAP has a license, a blanket license, so you can play any song, and it's covered, and the royalties go through it. But, and this is a key point, individual members of ASCAP, so musicians, songwriters, they can ask for their works to be excluded from a particular political campaign's license. So me as a musician, if I was Jack White, I don't know if he's represented by them, could go to him and say, I don't want Trump to use music, exclude my stuff from the blanket license you're giving his campaign.
Right.
And it also warns that it depends how you use a song. Like if you use a song all the time as you walk on, or if you use it as particular points, like for example, Kamala Harris is using a Beyonce track, but that's been approved and agreed with Beyonce. But if you use a song that makes it look like not just walk on music, but an endorsement, if it makes people think the artist, then they might have grounds to sue you on different area. Even if you've got license to actually play that music,
Right.
if you're making people think they've endorsed you, they may have. So there's quite well understood, clear rules about what you can use and how you can use it. But it kind of keeps happening. And it's mainly Trump, isn't it? Like, it's mainly Trump using stuff from liberal artists who don't like what he stands for. Like, you don't really get Kamala Harris using Kid Rock, which would probably spark a controversy in the other direction because he's a strong Trump supporter. But yeah, so we have it here, don't we? We have it here if the Conservative Party plays a song by a left-leaning artist, they complain. Yeah. But it turns out there are rules in the States, certainly, about you can't just might have the right to play things, but an artist also has the right to say, I don't want that campaign to play it, and then you have to respect that.
Okay. Finally, the infamous Fire Festival is making a return. For anyone who doesn't know, why is the festival so infamous?
Yeah, I mean, this is another podcast. Well, it has been several podcasts, hasn't it, actually, of explaining it.
Yeah.
So it was a festival in 2017 organised by a guy called Billy McFarland in Ja Rule in the Bahamas. And it was like a heavily promoted on social media by influencers like, come, Island Paradise Festival, luxurious stuff, beautiful food, beautiful accommodation. And basically everything went wrong. Like the security wasn't there, the food. I mean, there's a famous image of a cheese sandwich that was served, and they were promised gourmet food. And it's this cheese sandwich that honestly, it's the worst cheese sandwich you've ever seen. Like it's not even trying to be, which I'll come back to later. Remember this for later. And it all went wrong, and it went so spectacularly wrong that Billy McFarland, the actual guy behind it, ended up being done for wire fraud and defrauding investors and ticket holders. And he got 6 years in prison and went to prison. Then he came out and said, I'm doing Fire Festival too. So it's not only the same guy, he's kept the brand, which is... So I'm going to try and convince you to go, right? I'm going to try and pitch it to you.
Oh, all right.
So it's... There are cheap tickets. So you can get a cheap ticket for $1,400. But...
Okay. Right. Yeah.
If you're feeling flush... There's a $1.1 million ticket, which will include...
what I'm worried about is starting off in the queue for the £1,000 ticket and then finding that Fire Festival are using dynamic pricing, and by the end, I've paid for £1 million ticket.
£1 million ticket, but you do get luxury.
What'd you get? What'd you get for the £1 million?
Luxury yachts, scuba diving, and island hopping.
Yeah.
Also, he says he's got a festival production company involved this time around. They haven't booked any artists.
Oh, this is going to be my next question, but no one's confirmed.
No one confirmed yet. He has promised really good cheese sandwiches this time, which I have to take my hat off to the humour of the chap. But yeah, so it's just one of those. Can he really pull this off? Like the first one was so famously a bin fire, and yet he's coming back and saying, no, I can do this again. And it's almost like a mission. Like, I can do this. I will do it this time round. But I mean, we maybe should speculate on who you would get, because it's going to be a private island off the coast of Mexico.
Right. But what I mean, here's the thing. Just before the Fantasy Festival lineup, where is? I mean, we obviously don't know, I guess, but I mean, he's got to be getting investment from somewhere. Otherwise, he won't be able to guarantee that it happens, because he won't be able to pay the artists, because the artists, I would imagine, the agents for the artists will want at least half of their fee up front, which is, common practice at festivals. You get half the fee beforehand and then the other half when you've played, in which case he's going to have to pay out quite a lot of money. So he's going to have to get some money from somewhere. But then I guess if one person buys just £1 million ticket, maybe that's a start.
Well, that's true. And there was actually a really funny quote. I'm going to try and look it up now, from one of the investors last time. So there was a fight, and one of the investors first time round lost $1 million in it. And he said this quote, which is remarkably restrained, which is like, a lot of red flags, he said. And also, I'm not sure he's going about it the right way.
Right.
So, but yeah, I mean, I honestly, I don't know. I mean, I know I've seen festivals here that have had problems and not ended up paying the suppliers or paying the artists. And that's often, isn't it? That's often a death knell, because next year, no one. But I do wonder, is there a pitch to artists that's like, no, it is Fire Festival 2. Surely you're brave enough to do this. And there might be some kind of a curious, I want to be part of this, if only to be in a documentary if it all goes, wrong this time. But yeah, I mean, it's $1.1 million for a festival ticket there. I mean, that's bold.
It is. And until Fat Dog are confirmed, I think I'm out for now. And that's where we'll leave it. Thank you very much for listening once again. And if you have enjoyed the show, and we hope you have, please do subscribe to us in your podcast app. And of course, give us a review and a rating if you have time. And if you can, tell a couple of other people about it. Help us spread the word. Also, if you have a question which you'd like answered on the program, email your queries to us at thepriceofmusicpodcast@gmail.com. And finally, if you'd like to support the show, you can become a Price of Music fan or super fan for as little as £2 a month. Just go to patreon.com/thepriceofmusic to find out more. Thanks again, everybody. Cheerio.